Good afternoon, everyone. Would you please take your seats? Thank you. Good afternoon again. I'm Mary Ann Peters, and together with Grace Jackson, I chair the committee that organized this afternoon's event. Grace, where are you? So a warm welcome to those of you here at Georgia Pacific and those participating virtually. It's really good to see so many friends for the first time in a long time in 3D. so thanks to all of you, whether you're in person or here on a computer or a device, for joining us for IWF Georgia's third annual celebration of International Women's Day. Women hold up the sky, as Chairman Mao said. But here on Earth, women don't have equal access to the resources and opportunities they need to live their best lives. And that's been true for most of human history. The gains a few of us have made over a few decades in a few places are very fragile, as COVID has shown. And yet, when women succeed, they pull everyone up with them. Study after study has shown that what is good for women is good for the whole community. This afternoon, we're going to hear about how women are doing in 2022, about progress we've made and setbacks we've suffered. And we're going to shine a light on extraordinary women who have responded to setbacks and adversity with courage and resilience. So let's begin this afternoon's program. It's my great pleasure to introduce our wonderful MC, Saleemah Abdul-Ghafur, Chief of Staff and Chief Communications Officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Please help me to welcome Saleemah.
Welcome, good afternoon, welcome everyone. Welcome to Women's History Month, and welcome to IWF Georgia's third International Women's Day event. We welcome those of you here in the audience and those of you streaming online. We have a robust and engaging program today, one that will inform and inspire you. We have a range of speakers, global experts talking about the condition of women around the world, and local personal accounts from Afghan women rebuilding their lives here in our city. We also have a set of fearless women business owners and entrepreneurs navigating these uncertain times through a global pandemic. This programming is possible because of the generous support of our sponsors, and you'll hear about our sponsors throughout the day. Our sponsors bring us this programming, but they also support the IWF Fellows, who you'll hear more about later in the program, and some of them are here today in the audience. First, I want to thank our presenting sponsors, Georgia Pacific, Georgia Power, Kaiser Permanente, and Liz Blake. I'd also like to thank our leading and supporting sponsors, Equifax and Kimberly-Clark. We appreciate your support on this important day. Our theme today is resilience. And I won't sugarcoat the extreme challenges that face women, both here and abroad. From Clarkston to Kiev, women are fighting. We are fighting to keep our families together, to keep our communities together, to make sure that we have access to educational opportunities, to health care, to housing, that our vote is counted. And we're doing this all through a global pandemic. Today, during this program, we will highlight what is working for women and how you can be helpful. Maya Angelou has a poem called Our Grandmothers. And in that poem, she says, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. I am the granddaughter of Maud Daniels and Bessie Marshall. As I think of my grandmothers, I invite you to think of your grandmothers. Think of the elder women who have brought you to this moment, who have been a guiding force in your life, who have made sacrifices known and unknown so that you could be here today. Think of their strength, their struggles, their imperfections, their joy, their laughter. They were resilient, and we are resilient. Remember them throughout this program. To get us started, we're going to start with Maya Lawrence. Maya, we're so honored to have you here amongst us. Maya was raised in New York. She's now based in our city here in Atlanta. She is a proud graduate of Spelman. She is an author, a performing artist, and she's followed the artistic path from Lincoln Center and the Public Theater to her current home at the Tony Award-winning Alliance Theater as a resident artist and allyship program director. Maya's first children's book, Do You Love the Dark?, published in conjunction with the Mayor's Summer Reading Club, has been adapted into a play, and you can actually see it right now at the Alliance Theater for the next few weeks. Maya, please, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Maya. I use she, her pronouns proudly. And I am from the Alliance Theater, the allyship program director. And as I've been doing facilitation on anti-bias work, the biggest tool I've used is breath. And I think COVID really showed us how important breath is. So I'd like to take a moment for us to be in this space together and take a breath. I'm going to guide us and by counting to 3, and I invite you to close your eyes if you would like, or just be here in the moment with me. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Hold. 2, 3. Release. 2, 3. I'm going to do this one more time. And when I finish, I'm going to begin my poem. But you all are in the poem with me, so when you hear this ring, please feel free to breathe. It's a reminder. It's useful. Breathe in. 2, 3. Hold. 2, 3. Release. 2, 3. Her story. Her story was not written. It was sung. It's as essential as oxygen to lungs, as blood to birth, as water to earth. It's a tale as old as time, and it's a truth that was never heard. Her story was hummed. Its notes not noticed as it reverberated against the walls of time. The echo of her story mistaken as the voice of mine. But as her daughter, and her daughter's daughter, and her daughters-in-law, it is our duty to dictate and declare that despite history's lies, we are here as her heir to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but. So let's raise our glasses in the air. A toast. I hear the clink of their chalices as they toast to their accomplishments. They feast over my feats. Every letter I string together is a libation to their liberation and toil. I am the fruit of their self-fertilized soil. I am the grain of the lessons that they ingrained in their offspring. When I speak, it is not of my own volition, but it is the evolution of their presence and their lessons. They don't get disappointed at my dyslexia or my inability to configure the perfect participle of a word. They rejoice in my ability to resurrect the respect of their world. I am grateful to them. They are my thanks, giving abundantly to me their unbastard, unabashed baby in a basket, swaddled in their hopes and dreams. I am their ideas and thoughts and breath. They didn't get too complete. They are so generous, so sweet. Sheesh, do they love me? So if you find that I neglect to say thank you to you, it isn't arrogance. It's me appropriately placing the praise to whom it belongs to. So here is a toast to Althea and the Dame, and for Sandra just the same, for Maya, Anita, and all the others I cannot name, for my ancestors, my ancestors, and my ascended stars. And now I encourage you to say their names, the women that have brought you to who you are. Let's take a moment. Come on. Her name may not be said, but it is prayed. Her presence relayed from generation to generation until her nations are saved from war before and all the more. Her name may not be said, but her rhythm will be rung. Her song will be sung. Her story will be hummed, and her glory will be won until this ceaseless song is done. Beautiful. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you. Now, we'll turn our attention to the status of women worldwide. There are very few who are more qualified to have this discussion than CARE CEO Michelle Nunn and Carter Center CEO Paige Alexander. Both of these women are on the front line and have frontline views of some of the most challenging situations on the planet. And both of their organizations have taken deliberate action to focus on the survival and well-being of girls and women. We are proud to have them here today. Both women are IWF Georgia members, and they will be in conversation about women's lives here and abroad. Michelle Nunn and Paige Alexander.
Thanks, Saleemah. And Maya, thank you for bringing us into this space, truly. What a beautiful way of beginning. I don't know about you, but it helped me because I'm thinking back 2 years ago, and I'm having a little bit of a sense of a time warp because I'm remembering this gathering 2 years ago and literally walking in the door, and we're all unclear about whether we were able to shake hands, right? It was a week before the global pandemic was called forth, and I remember giving a presentation, and there were a lot of kind of difficult statistics to talk about, and there were also some hopeful things. But in the last 2 years, frankly, we have lost a lot of ground from a gender equality perspective. Now, there have been some gains, and we should talk about where we've had some victories, but overall, the trend lines over the last 2 years have been really sobering. And so I am really grateful for the opportunity to be in conversation with Paige about this. And I feel like this is a little bit of a coming home for Paige, because she is from Atlanta, but has been all around the world now to come back to Atlanta to lead the Carter Center and to, again, sort of change the world right here from her own hometown. And so, we're going to be in a bit of a conversation, but mainly my having the opportunity to really talk to Paige about the state of the world for women, and also the ways that the Carter Center and other organizations are addressing those needs, those challenges, and those opportunities that are before us. So first of all, welcome, Paige. Literally, welcome to Atlanta. Welcome to IWF. And let's start by maybe just to walk people a little bit through your journey. Especially maybe through the lens of the women that have been influential in your life, because some of them are obviously big heroes to many of us right here in Atlanta.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. This is the first stage I've sat on in 20 months of actually being in my position, which I think says a lot about sort of where we've all been buried for the last 2 years. It's wonderful to be back, as my mother likes to say. After visiting other places for 35 years, I finally came home. So it is nice to be back in Atlanta, and it gives me a real opportunity to see a lot of familiar faces and people that I've known and I've worked with, and also to come back to a place like Atlanta that has Michelle at CARE, Jill Savitt at National Center for Civil and Human Rights, Faye Twersky at the Blank Foundation, Rochelle Walensky coming in town every once in a while. It's really, and Andrea Young at NAACP. I mean, ACLU, we really have a strong group of women who are working on a lot of issues around here. So it makes Atlanta a little different than the place I left in 1984.
So tell us a little bit about what you're feeling optimistic or hopeful about as it relates to women and gender equality. Let's start on the hopeful side.
Yeah. So on the hopeful side, as I was listening to Saleemah and Maya, and that was beautiful and a hard act to follow. Talking about what brought us here. I mean, our parents brought us here, our mothers, our grandmothers. It's really, the fact that I am sitting on this stage in a city that my parents, my mother in particular, really spent so much time civically active, and that I am now here. My mother's Elaine Alexander, for those of you who may not know. It gives me a sense of belonging, both in Atlanta and in the world, because they actually elevated us. They allowed us to be the women that we are and to take on the roles that we've taken. And so I am hopeful that there has been that change over the last several generations, which has been nice. I think that we are also working hard to elevate voices that had not been heard before, whether it's in our own movements in the countries that we have worked in, whether it's in the racial reawakening, whether it's what you're seeing happening in Ukraine right now. There are parts of that make me incredibly hopeful, because people are taking matters into their own hands, and they feel they have their own voices. And that's not something that I think we would have seen a couple of decades ago. So I think we're very fortunate.
Saleemah and Paige and I had the chance yesterday to be on a kind of pre-conversation with Rose Scott. So we had a chance to talk about some of these trend lines. And one of the things that I reflected upon is that if you look at, for instance, child marriage, there has been a lot of progress. So even 10 years ago, 1 out of every 4 girls in the world was married before the age of 18. It's pretty startling, right? And now, 10 years later, and 10 years worth of progress, it's 1 out of every 5. But still, if I'd started out by just telling you 1 out of every 5 girls is married before the age of 18, we have a long way to go, right? Until we really feel like that we have real gender equality and choice for all girls around the world. There are a lot of other statistics that I think speak to, again, both progress but also the journey that is left before us. If you think about parliaments around the world, there were 25 years ago, 11% of parliaments were women. Today, it's about 25%. But 25%, right? We still have a long way to go. We would have to double that over the coming years in order to get to 50%. So there are a lot of challenges that remain, right. And so maybe we can talk about how the Carter Center is addressing some of those fundamental issues of women's rights that we have been seeing eroding in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think, well, first, why don't we go to the video, because we can talk a lot about how these diverse voices have been raised up and how women and girls are taking matters into their own hands and moving things into civic education and curriculum that allow people to learn when they're younger, especially girls, to learn when they're younger how to have a voice. So I think if we can go to the video.
Yes, so you have the right to go to school. Yes. So which means that all of you here, your right is fulfilled, right? Yes. So can we give a high five to our parents? Yay, they brought us to school.
Asma Ayub is a counselor at the Ghana Lebanon Islamic Secondary School in Accra, where about 70% of the students are girls.
She has been teaching us human rights and human rights for girls.
After attending a Carter Center-sponsored training program, she was inspired to introduce a human rights curriculum at her school.
If I look back into the community where I grew up from, I saw physical abuse on girls sometimes because they were vulnerable. As I grew up, as I had exposure, as I had the experience, I had to speak out because I had to be a voice for the young girl.
Determined to help change patterns of abuse, Ayub remained resilient in the face of resistance from some and eventually achieved buy-in. Her classes focus on 3 areas.
They had the right to be free from all forms of violence, and then another one is the right to choose a partner, fighting against forced marriage, and then the third one is the right to education.
Madam Asma taught us to have the confidence to do anything, because it's not a matter about being afraid, it's the matter about using your rights that you have.
My dreams for the girls in the school, I would say it's actually bigger than what I would dream for myself.
I want to be a doctor.
I want to be a nutritionist.
I also want to be a pediatrician. I also want to be like Madam Asma and defend people's rights.
So much, that's all their voice, that's all them taking, these women taking this responsibility of teaching the next generation. I'll say that our gains, I mean, you were asking about the challenges, our gains have been very fragile, although you've given statistics about increased, better statistics on child marriage and better statistics on members of parliament. When you look at some of the problems that continue to exist, just over the last 2 years, I would say twice as many women the rate of women outside the workforce has fallen. In 2019, 13 million fewer women are now employed in 2021. Because of COVID, in many cases, they were frontline workers, they had to stay home. These are the things that these gains are incredibly fragile, that we might have started making them, and then something like a global pandemic can set everybody back. And that's in the Western world. Can only imagine what's happening overseas. We have domestic violence, the growth of domestic violence in many of these places. We have a 175% increase in domestic violence in Colombia. In India, it's 250%. Women were kept home, they were staying home, and so their situations that might not have been good to start with became worse. And so I think the steps forward that you have to take are like scalpel-like precision to go in and say, what are the problems and where can we address them? And how can they be addressed from the ground up? And all of us look around, and again, in the Western world, we can say, well, you have to act locally as well as globally. You can do things here, but you also have to realize that people overseas are suffering as well, and what can we do for those next steps?
I think one of the interesting things to me about what we've seen transpire over the last 2 years is that the trend lines for women around the world have been similar, right? So more women have lost their jobs, more women have lost more income, more women have suffered from gender-based violence, and more women have had disproportionate amounts of responsibility as it relates to care. So all of these things have reminded us of our solidarity around the world and of the journey that's still before us from a true gender equality perspective. You know, I often quote, not exactly always getting it right, but President Carter basically saying that women's rights should be at the very center of our human rights efforts, and in fact are the most important neglected human rights in the world. So maybe just talk a little bit more. We saw a picture of the programming, but maybe a little bit more about the Carter Center's overall programming as it relates to women's rights and gender equality.
Absolutely. Well, as everyone knows, President and Mrs. Carter started the Carter Center in 1982 when they finished their time in the White House. And when they came in, they wanted to justify what they had seen happening in Plains, Georgia while they were growing up, the poor rural farmers that they had spent time with, and what they saw in their journeys while they were at the White House. And so in establishing the Carter Center, one of the benefits has been that they have taken those lessons and we have taken that as our North Star. So access to information being a perfect example of a place that we started. And for 10 years this program was running, and we were realizing that women weren't at the table. And Laura Newman, who's here today, realized it and went to President Carter and said, women aren't at the table. We need to do a very specific program for women. And he said, get me the information. And so between Bangladesh, Guatemala, and I want to say Liberia, they did interviews with 1,700 women and 130 agencies and realized that women weren't accessing the information that was readily available to them. So from that program, it's grown, and we're now doing something called Inform Women, Transform Lives, which is working in 24 cities around the world, including Chicago and Atlanta and Washington, D.C., but all over the world, to help raise the voice of women, to help use the information platform to get city services that are being provided out to the more vulnerable communities, and most of those obviously are women. And whether it's how to pick up trash, how to get small business loans, all of those elements, we're empowering the cities through a communication tool. And so you can do that on a larger level because you have to actually triangulate it. It has to be done from a policy level as well as from the level of people in the villages saying, I just need my road paved so my kids can get to school safely, or I need lights so I don't worry about being attacked when I'm coming home from a job late at night. So doing it at the policy level and listening to our organizations on the ground have really allowed us to put together a portfolio of programs that have really addressed some of the concerns we're seeing. But again, you have to go in with scalpel-like precision to make sure that you're actually being equitable in the assistance that you're providing and you're giving them the tools they need, not just the tools you think they need.
One of my favorite programs at CARE, which I talk about a lot, is we called savings programs, village savings programs. And it's extraordinary to me that women working together in small groups, first of all, can build up their own savings capacity to start small businesses. But in Niger, we started 30 years ago, half of the women that have been elected to political office have come through a savings group. So these savings groups, when you literally drive around Niger, you will see women all throughout the countryside who are wearing their savings group uniform, and they're advocates and they're change agents and they're at the community table as real change makers and with a real voice, and that makes all the difference in terms of the future trajectory for families and for societies.
Right, and both of us come here with a lot of stories about young women who have taken it upon themselves to teach their parents these things as well. And in Bangladesh, there was a woman a young girl who was out of school during COVID, and she was trying to figure out, well, how can I continue my education? And so she went to the Agriculture Extension Services and said, is there training that can be done? And the next time they did a training, they did an all-female training. So 50 women were able to get this training. Now the question is, would anyone else have felt empowered enough to access that information to actually then follow through and get a group of 50 women who now know how to take out small loans, who now know how to do a seed farm, all of these different elements, because this young woman stepped up and walked in. And that's what you have to empower at that level.
You know, when you think about resilience, one of my favorite care stories is of a young girl who was married against her will at age 14 in Ethiopia, and she ran away. And then she climbed a tree in her village, and she said, "I'm not coming down until my mother gives me permission to go back to school." And she stayed in the tree for 2 days. And her mother finally said, "I give you permission to go back to school." Her marriage was annulled, and she is now an advocate for girls in her community, for her own sisters. And so it is amazing the resilience and the capacity and the courage of young people often to sort of be the guiding light for elders, but for women and girls to be in solidarity and real change agents in their own communities, and to be the change that we want to see, but to then ripple that out for so many others.
Right, and I mean, everyone's heard of Malala in Pakistan, and the fact that she had advocated for education and she was shot by the Taliban, and she still came forward and continued to do that. We all know that story. There are millions, probably, of those stories out there of people who have really stepped into this void and have been voices like our parents, like our mothers were, to move the needle on empowering women and having them be resilient for what they can contribute to society.
So we have a bunch of really empowered women right here who are listening in or who are here in the audience. And so how do you advise people to pull the levers of change for gender equality, both here in the US and globally?
Yeah, so I think you have to be intentional. You really have to think about where you're putting your efforts and where you have the ability to affect change. And a lot of us actually, and women in particular, tend to think, well, I can't do anything, or my voice isn't going to be important. That's not true. As mothers, I'm raising 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, who have very strong voices now, and sometimes a little bit too strong. 25-year-old daughter who's saying, why in Ukraine are they removing, are they making the men stay? The women should stay too, they should be fighting. So, there's a balance there. But I think that, what we can do is try to be intentional about our work. And so from our side, programmatically, that is what we do with donor dollars. We actually go in and say, mental health is a big issue. How are we going to address mental health, especially during a pandemic? And you've got, all of these issues coming up, and then how do we reach out to a community and bring people in? And many of you touch the communities that can be very helpful, and for that reason, leaning in to the good ideas that you think you have or that others have is an important element. There's always the financial side of it, but there's also your heart and soul putting it in and making sure that people you talk to, that you engage and have conversations to make people realize what can be done next.
Are there particular figures in the world, women leaders, and grassroots leaders, or recognized political leaders, or movements that are particularly inspiring to you right now, or have been over the last few years?
Well, I think the democracy movement writ large is inspiring, but it is those individual stories of the village saving in loans, the people who are, the young girls who are going out and getting an education, fighting for those rights, what we just saw. I think those movements are important to me. I'd be remiss if I just chose one. And I know that CARE is probably in the same situation. I do think mental health right now is such a valid concern. And so that's an area that anyone working around that is important. But this access to information, access to justice, and making sure that everybody has the information they need, because that's power. We all know that once you have information, that becomes powerful, whether you're at a board table or whether you're at a dining room table. And so making sure that you are well informed. And so all of the disinformation that's happening around the world is also disconcerting, because those are the messages that get out. So being educated in what matters to you, and pushing that out is important. But I'm sure you probably have groups that...
Well, I mean, I do think, because sometimes I think we startle with the daunting statistics. And so just to pull up, I mean, if we've seen some real progress, if you think about from Ireland to Colombia around sexual and reproductive health rights, we have seen really significant gains that have been tireless, movement-led, women-led over years in many cases. And I think the recognition that some of this change is long-term and does take a long time to get done, but especially those that are relentlessly pursuing these changes over time in their societies, I think is a real point of inspiration. And we do get to see it all over the world. We work with a lot of domestic workers, especially in Central and South America. And I was in Ecuador in December, and just meeting with a group of recyclers, for instance, and recyclers are literally, when you're driving down the street, the ones that are picking up the trash. And they're picking the trash up night after night. They're doing it in dangerous conditions. And they've gone in Ecuador and in many places from doing that as individuals, each one going out and doing that, to joining together in cooperatives. And there are now 20,000 recyclers in Ecuador. They work together almost in a kind of cooperative union in which they are guaranteed now a sort of minimum wage by working together, and are advocating for Social Security, and are, as they described it to me, during COVID, when many seniors, elders could not work, and those who were disabled couldn't work, the others figured out a way of supporting them and enabling them to continue and support one another in that way. So there are a lot of interesting and important, I think, especially women-led grassroots movements that are creating change around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the trends, again, back to the global trends of the positives that we're seeing and the negatives we're seeing, I don't know if you've found certain regions or if you're focusing more on policy at the policy level, but I also think, and we see this in our backyard here in Georgia, we're legislating a lot. And so I think that's another place that people have their voice in democracy. I'm just talking about writ large, and whatever voice you have, it's important to have a voice. And I think that you're seeing a lot of movement, a lot of more women running for office, and that's a place where I think there can be effective change. But again, back to the grassroots level and the community level, we all have to be so careful that we don't just see something that makes sense to us and it doesn't make sense. Recycling and domestic workers, that is a cultural phenomenon from country to country. And you can't just say there's one size fits all. And I think that's an important part of development work, is one size does not fit all.
Well, supporting leaders within communities to lead the change that they want to see. Right. I think is where we're all going, and what we're seeing that's really exciting if you think about the world. So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about your daughters and how it sounds like if your daughters are like my daughter, they're giving you a lot of advice. Regularly. But if you, what advice are you giving your daughters, and what are you telling especially young women, in terms of this moment in time, which really does, I mean, I sometimes think about the fact that my kids have come they've come of age in such a strange time, right? They were aware of, when my young daughter, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were running against each other, my daughter said, "Do you like the boy or the girl?" And I thought, that's so great that they see that, that they're seeing these, and these are the normalized choices for them. And then we have Donald Trump. And then we have a global pandemic, and I got a call from my 19-year-old the other day who never follows current events and was really concerned about Ukraine in this moment in time. So what are you telling young people about this moment in time and the opportunity and challenges that we need them to face into?
Yeah, I think resilience really describes this generation, because we all want to go back, or some of us want to go back to the office and have people showing up on a regular basis. And you've got people now who are saying, I'm happy to work from home. I don't need that interaction. I worry a little bit about the lack of interaction for that generation. The listening is such an important part of being a professional and learning, so not being able to listen on a screen and in non-3D format, you don't hear, you don't see, you don't participate as much. And so I think there's very little I can tell my daughters that they don't decide to tell me first, but language is important, and they usually school me on language. Listening is incredibly important. Engaging with people at a level outside of just the professional sphere is important. And you can be indignant and you can be righteous, but being righteously indignant is really not going to get you very far. And I learned that just feeling so strongly about things when I was first in the workplace and first in government, as Marianne knows. It's you can get very upset with the bureaucrats, but if you do not find a better outlet for sharing your concerns and your voice, it's going to be really painful. And I am afraid that a little bit of this generation, is losing that. So, the advice I give them is engage, be present, listen, talk to people, and then make sure that you formulate how you feel before you speak. Don't be a wallflower, but you really need to choose your words carefully. And that goes back to language.
So maybe we do have one more video that is from CARE that we thought we would share. Again, maybe a little bit of an inspiration to leave us on that note. And then I think we'll have a few minutes of opportunity for questions. So while we show the video, be thinking of your questions for Paige or for me, and let's run with it. This is a story of a woman in Bangladesh that CARE works with.
ছোটবেলা থেকে এটা স্বপ্ন দেখতাম না যে আমি একদিন গাড়ি ঠিক করব বা আমার মনে হয় আমি এখনো কাউকে দেখিনি যে মেয়েরা ধরেন মেকানিক্যাল কাজ করে। আমরা অনেক গরিব ফ্যামিলি থেকে আসে, এতটাই কষ্ট করতে আমরা অনেক সময় না খেয়ে থাকতাম। তো আমার এটা ছোটবেলা থেকেই খারাপ লাগে, কারণ আমার চোখের সামনে সেই কষ্টটা চলে আসে। 2005-এ কেয়ার বাংলাদেশ থেকে আসে আমাদের বাসায় শহর প্রকল্প থেকে, নাকি ধরেন গরিব মেয়েদেরকে কাজ শেখাবে বলে, আর ড্রাইভিং যদি শিখো তাহলে তারা তোমাকে চাকরি দেবে, মানে চালায়নি এবং মেয়েদেরকে কখনো চালানোও দেখ। তখন সে আমার সব কথা শুনে রাজি হয়ে যায়। বললাম যে স্যার আমি তাহলে টেকনিশিয়ানের কাজ শিখবো। আসলে আরেকটু বেশি ভালো লাগছে তখন আমি। আর বাইরের লোকজন তো গ্রামের লোকজন আমার বলে অনেক কিছুই বলে, আসলে তাদের সেই মানে চিন্তা ভাবনাটা চেঞ্জ হয়ে গেছে। এবার আমি প্রথম স্যালারির টাকাটা পেয়ে যখন বাবা মাকে পাঠাই, আসলে এটা অনেক কি বলবো। তাহলে আমরা ওই যে বললাম ছোটোখাটো একটা গ্যারেজ দেওয়ার ইচ্ছা আছে আমাদের। আমি বলবো যে আত্মবিশ্বাস আর চেষ্টা থাকলে প্রত্যেকেই, সে ছেলে হোক আর মেয়ে হোক, তার লক্ষ্যে পৌঁছাতে পারে। যেমন আমি আমার লক্ষ্যে পৌঁছে গেছি, কারণ একজন ছেলের পাশাপাশি একজন মেয়েরাও সব কাজ করতে পারে।
I was in Bangladesh a couple of years ago and visited the CARE office, and we have a variety of programs that have been very transformational in Bangladesh. But one of them that started with something quite small was that CARE in our programming started to have women drivers instead of just men drivers a number of years ago. And literally there were no women drivers in all of Bangladesh. And really CARE, along with a lot of other trends, but was one of those pioneers. And if you're driving in Bangladesh now, you will see a lot of women drivers. And just that opening up of the horizon of the aperture is really something quite, I think, exciting. And when you think about resilience and you think about human potential and capability, and you think about the reservoir of talent that exists in this world from women that is yet to be tapped, we have a lot to be hopeful for if we can just do that. So why don't we open it up to some questions?
No, Stephanie, you have a virtual question? All right. How about I go first? There's a virtual question, question from the virtual audience. We have Virginia Hepner asking, thanks. Other than NYT and BBC, are there any news sources you recommend for global news? Headline summary versus long reads.
Go ahead.
For global news? Well, that's become very political. Even answering that question has become political, so I'm a little hesitant to do that. You know, I lived overseas. I was in Amsterdam for 3 years before we moved here, and so, you know, trying to get away from the news is what I was really trying to do, but CNN was constantly on. You know, I find that there are a lot of local news sources overseas. There are a lot of local news sources that actually are quite good and that aggregate data together, but, you know, I'm still kind of a, you know, CNN type of person, so.
Yeah, I think that was from Virginia Hepner, and I was going to say I have to say that the first thing I do is listen to the BBC podcast in the morning, and then I turn to the New York Times, and the reason is because I think this is really important. I think that Americans are getting such a tiny sliver of the news that is actually relevant for the whole world. Mm-hmm. It is astounding, actually. Even if you look at MSNBC, even, I mean, I love Good Morning Joe along with everybody else, but the tiny fraction of what is covered in the U.S. media of the totality of events in the world is both disturbing and something that I think that we really do have to address. So I do just go to the BBC podcast in the morning, and then what I do is get a report and situation reports that I'd be happy to share with Virginia from our countries around the world, and it is quite a different perspective, and I think it is really incumbent upon us from a citizenry perspective to really search out that global news wherever you might get it. The Economist, I have to say, is an old standby that I think also does a good job of covering the news. And I think that frankly some of the UK news is actually quite. The Guardian is one of the better sources, I think. So those are a couple of ideas.
Yeah, and Al Jazeera too.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we watched overseas a lot as well.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. My name's Nuru, I'm from Kenya. Thank you, Sheila, for the invitation, Sheila Whiteman. You talked a lot about resilience. And to me, I think climate change is one of the biggest threats to women, particularly in the global south. And then the second biggest threat is technology, the fourth industrial revolution. You find with the push towards automation that's been accelerated by COVID, you don't have many women who are being trained on how to use machines and more so computers. So could you share with us some of the programs and policies that you've seen that work and how that can be accelerated? And then the point about sensitization, and I think America somewhat is delinked from some of the concerns around the world. So how do we address that? Thank you.
Yeah, so you know, when I was at USAID, we did a lot of work in STEM education, primarily in North Africa. So in Egypt, in Israel, Palestine, we were working in that area. And I think that again, as you talk about cyber and the ability for women to enter the workforce that way, I think education becomes a big component of it. I spent time in Tanzania with CARE, actually, for this Supporting Adolescent Girls program that my mother had supported. And it was really impressive to see how women were coming from villages into a workforce, or the potential of a workforce, because that is sort of the feeder that's missing. And I'd say STEM education is a big piece of that.
I would just add, if you think about the challenges for women in the next 10 years at a global level, climate change is absolutely an existential challenge, and for all of us, obviously. But women and girls are disproportionately impacted. I could give you a whole set of statistics, which I know that you already know, and we really have not invested in the adaptation for those who are going to be most deeply impacted by climate change and who have had the least to do with precipitating climate change, by the way. And so one of the CARE programs that we're working on and building upon is creating a platform for women to be the stewards of the climate adaptation that needs to happen. That's everything from selling solar, creating entrepreneurs of women who are selling solar panels for electricity, to a kind of girls' core that's focused on local community climate adaptation. And then I would also say that from a digital perspective, for instance, CARE is really thinking, if you think about what's the modern day CARE package, a CARE package 75 years ago was a package of food. Right now it could actually be a mobile phone and access to a set of apps. And that's the kind of work that CARE is doing, which we're envisioning. And I was talking to the Gates Foundation just yesterday, their leader of gender equality, and they said our strategy is starting to be not women having access to digital for this or for this, but as a fundamental right, the equal access to technology, and to be equipped to use it. So, and then I do not have an answer for how we can ensure that Americans have a broader global perspective, but let's all work on that. I think we just have one more minute, but maybe one more question.
Hey, Maria Saporta, it's so good to see two wonderful, strong women from Atlanta in this space. Can you talk about the partnerships, relationships of global organizations based in Atlanta and helping orchestrate greater impact internationally?
Do you want to go?
So obviously the Carter Center also works in health, and I think this is going to be the global health center of the world to the extent that you've written about it too, Maria. I think we have this opportunity in Atlanta to bring a lot of these voices together. Look, we've become the center of the political universe. We're also becoming the center of the global health universe with CDC, with Emory, with so many different organizations here. And I think this is a really important time for us to actually have that voice and to get people involved and understand. You know, the global pandemic equaled everything. It showed that we are as vulnerable as anybody else. And I think that the work we're doing to move forward in the health sphere is important. And I will suggest Michelle answer that as well. But on the climate change, one of the things I did want to say that I had forgotten is that conflict resolution is such a big, important part of these discussions on climate change. Water scarcity leads to conflict. This is why we have wars. This is why Mali, Sudan, we've had these issues all over the continent. And having those conversations, women are at the table. We made a lot of jokes about the binder full of women needed for a peace talk in Liberia, or whether a presidential candidate had a binder full of women he was going to use. This is actually an opportunity that women can really be at the table to help when we discuss climate change, when we talk about the global needs of people being active. So, sorry.
Yeah, I would just add, Maria, you've been a great, I think, aspirational thinker about how Atlanta should be the global public health center of the United States and really of the world. And we have a lot of capacity. I think a lot of us work very closely together, everything from internships together with Emory to the Carter Center, but I actually think we could do more. And so I hope you'll keep asking that question, writing about how Atlanta should be leading in the world, because if you think about the organizations and institutions that are located here, we really are a global city. And, and when I think about how do we appeal to young people, I don't think it's just by telling them that Atlanta has a cool social scene, but I think it's about this is a place where you can change the world. And that's the promise that I think is most hopeful about our city. I think we're over time. I'm going to give you 10, do you have 10 seconds or 15 seconds of anything that you want to leave the audience with, either inspirational or as a challenge or a call to action?
No, I think just the fact you're here, people who are watching, this is an important place to engage. And so thank you for your interest, and to the extent that our organizations can be an outlet for you to get engaged, we encourage it.
And I'll just end by saying, as I was running out the door, I was talking to our VP of Humanitarian Affairs, who just got back from Afghanistan. And I just want to have us all remember the women in Afghanistan and the women around the world who are still living in grossly unequal conditions. But she told me about sitting with a group of women who were all a part of one of the CARE savings group, and one of the last questions she asked was, how are you going to do this? They were talking about starting small businesses, starting a bakery, and one of them said, we've not done it before, but we will do it. We'll do it because we've learned, because we've been educated, because we're ready, and because we have limited options. And so when we think about resilience, let's think about those women, those girls, and also remember that even in Afghanistan, as one of my colleagues says, you cannot uneducate a girl. Yeah. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to share today. And thank you, Paige. Welcome back. Welcome home.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Michelle. We will do it. The women said in Afghanistan, we will do it. Thank you. I think we have a video. And now, a word from our presenting sponsor and host today, Georgia Pacific.
We are all connected to the world around us and to each other. These days, that's sometimes easy to forget. All too often, the focus is on what makes us different. That's why at Georgia Pacific, we believe in bringing people together. For us, it starts here, in the public spaces where people connect every day, where communities come together and come alive with an energy all their own. At Georgia Pacific, we've made a commitment to make the areas where we live and work better. From playgrounds and ball fields to parks and trails, we're focused on bringing people together in ways that enrich lives. To make it happen, we give time, we give money, and a big piece of our hearts. It only makes sense that a leader in sustainable forestry should also be a leader in helping our communities thrive, the places where we've put down our roots. Because we are all connected. And every day, these connections come to life in the fields, parks, and green spaces we help support.
Thank you, Georgia Pacific. Michelle set us up nicely in talking about and invoking and bringing into this space the women of Afghanistan and their resilience. Our next segment is going to be a deeper look at Afghanistan through the lens of women. We'll hear first from USAID's Asia Bureau Deputy for a macro view of US policy and the current state of Afghanistan, particularly women in Afghanistan. Then, in a videotape segment, we'll hear from 3 Afghan women now rebuilding their families here in Atlanta. And we'll conclude with a panel of 3 agencies working here with our families in Atlanta. So let me first introduce Maria Longi, who joins us via Zoom from Washington, D.C. Maria is Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Asia Bureau of USAID. USAID provides economic, development, and humanitarian assistance around the world in support of the foreign policy goals of the United States. Welcome, Maria. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon, everybody. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you today about USAID's humanitarian and development programs in Afghanistan. I'm honored to be back in at least a virtual room with my good friend Paige Alexander. Atlanta is very lucky to have her there and in the important leadership role that she's in now. And we're still trying to fill the void after she left 4 years ago. So lucky you, Atlanta. We appreciate the International Women Forum Georgia's interest and support for our work and hope that this session gives you more insight into what we are doing and the challenges that many Afghans are facing. We work hard every day with our partners and our Afghanistan Affairs Unit staff in Doha, Qatar, to keep critical humanitarian development operations going. The people of Afghanistan are resilient, as you could tell by Michelle Nunn's previous comment, but they do need and want international support. Right now, USAID is working on 3 fronts in Afghanistan. First, we are responding with humanitarian assistance to the ever-worsening humanitarian crisis there. Second, we are supporting a sustainable recovery for the Afghan people, including support for basic needs such as livelihoods, education, and health. And finally, in all of our work, we're supporting women and girls throughout our programming. First, I'll give you an update on our humanitarian work. The U.S. continues to support vulnerable populations throughout the country, and it is the single largest donor of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan today. We have provided more than $500 million to this effort since August of 2021. All of our humanitarian partners remain operational in Afghanistan, despite challenges that do arise. This January, we announced the US government's initial contribution for this fiscal year of more than $300 million to meet urgent needs, all as outlined in the United Nations 2002 Humanitarian Response Plan for Afghanistan. Our humanitarian assistance allows our partners to provide food, nutrition, protection, shelter, essential health care, water, sanitation, and hygiene, and other life-saving services to respond to growing humanitarian needs. Unfortunately, the impacts of the basic humanitarian needs are only compounded by the prolonged drought, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the cumulative hardships of more than 4 decades of conflict. But we also know that responding to the humanitarian crisis is critical, but it's not sufficient. USAID and other international donors share the view that we cannot hope to resolve the humanitarian crisis without addressing critical economic and development issues. And that means support for Afghan women and girls to meaningfully participate in their economy and society. In January of this year, I joined the Department of State in Oslo, Norway, to meet with Afghan civil society and Taliban representatives to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. One important issue we raised during these meetings was education. We and our European colleagues all pressed the Taliban on the need for practical, budgetary, and technical preparations to ensure that their stated intention and plan to open schools this month becomes a reality. We had held out the possibility of funding in the education sector as an inducement for them to deliver. Importantly, we expressed to the Taliban the high priority placed on access to education in Afghanistan for girls. We emphasized the importance of allowing Afghan women and girls to have access not only to education, including universities, but also to job opportunities for women in all fields. I will note that the first public universities did reopen a few weeks ago in 6 provinces in Afghanistan. Both men and women were in attendance, although the media reported that the numbers of women students attending were small. Our education experts expected this for a variety of factors, including COVID-19. I cannot say strongly enough, supporting education in Afghanistan is a specific focus for USAID and the US government, particularly given our collective interest in ensuring that women and girls are still able to attend school. For their part, the Taliban has publicly pledged that all women and girls can access schools at all levels when schools open across the country. We also had the opportunity in Oslo to hear from women and other civil society representatives about their experiences and priorities. These very passionate and brave people highlighted human rights violations ranging from intimidation towards protesters, detention of women's rights activists, and media crackdowns. They emphasized the importance of humanitarian aid and inclusive governance. And while they were pleased to have face-to-face meetings with the Taliban representatives in Oslo, they clearly wanted to have these meetings on a larger scale back in Afghanistan. Excuse me, I have a cold. Through our diplomatic efforts, we will continue to push the Taliban to uphold the rights of Afghans, including the rights of women and girls. And for USAID, we will continue to monitor these conditions and coordinate with our partners and other donors to identify more opportunities to help the Afghan people. It's important to recognize that we are not doing this alone. We are engaging closely with international partners and donors, such as the United Nations and the World Bank, to provide both humanitarian and support for basic human needs and human rights, including for women and girls. We work hand in glove with the Department of State, including the Special Envoy for Afghan Women, Girls, and Human Rights, to engage with Afghan women leaders, civil society actors, and regional government officials and entities to find ways to empower Afghan people and Afghan women to help lead and determine the future of their country. Ultimately, it is our goal in Afghanistan that it be led by its people to ensure Afghan women have a seat at the table and not only address the humanitarian crisis, but to help Afghanistan arrive at a sustainable future that upholds the rights of all Afghans. Thank you again for inviting me here, and I look forward to the next presentations.
Thank you. And hope you feel better. We know you're working hard.
Oh, thank you.
We greatly appreciate your time and your expertise and your work on this. Now, I'd like you to turn your attention back to the screens. We'd like you to meet 3 Afghan women who are rebuilding their lives here in Atlanta. 2 are very recent arrivals, having left Afghanistan in August. We are protecting the identities of these women due to their safety concerns for themselves and their families. And we ask that you not record any portion of this part of the program and not post on social media. So no recording, no posting. Thank you in advance. Our 3rd interviewee has been here since 2015 and is comfortable revealing her identity. She is in fact joining us today. Dr. Jinnah Saidi is here in the audience. Thank you, Dr. Jinnah Saidi, for being here. Let's roll.
I came to the United States on August 2015 in the program called IVLP, International Visitor Leadership Program. When the program are finished, because of some security reason, I cannot go back my home country, so I stayed here. I applied a case for my husband and 2 kids, and later on, after 1 and 8 months, they came to United States and joined with me.
When Afghanistan was taken by Taliban, it was in 15th of August. 10 days we all night and all the day we are trying to reach to the airport, because the safest place was the airport, because everybody wants to reach to the airport and go out from Afghanistan. Mostly who works with Americans, who are politicians, and mostly the women who have job in Afghanistan, because the situation was not safe for them. There was 4 gates around the airport, that it was not any specific timing of opening that gates. Maybe in 2 o'clock, maybe in 12 o'clock or at night, and maybe in 3 o'clock. So everybody sleep around the airport. Finally, my brother has contact with American Army, and then they let us in. They contact with Taliban, and this car will be come to the gate, let them in. And then on 25th, we left Kabul airport, and we came to the Qatar. In the same spot when we was last night in the airport, behind the airport, it was a very big explosion, suicide explosion. And we are so happy, we are so lucky that we are safe.
The day that Taliban came to the Kabul and took control over the Kabul, I was went my job, and a security guard came to the shop and say, "Please close your shop and go to home because the security situation is not good." I was so afraid, and I think if I came out from the shop, the Taliban will be everywhere. Everybody was desperate. All women and children are crying in the street, and everybody doesn't know where they want to go. My husband, who's working with American embassy, he was in danger also. And my brother-in-law told me, you are not allowed to stay at home, because everybody, our neighbors, everybody knows that you will work and with American embassy. I do have some family members in Afghanistan. My mother, my sister, my 2 brothers with their families. My brother, who is an engineer, he used to work in a U.S. Army Corps of Engineering in Afghanistan. After collapse of Afghanistan government on August 2021, he lost his job. Beside that, he lost his hope, his desire, and his future. And also my sister, she's a young single girl. He used to work in NGOs called Netlinks. And after collapse of Afghanistan government, my sister also lost his job, his future, his dream,
his security.
I do have all my family members in Afghanistan. The only person from my family get out from Kabul is me, my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters. Everybody is in Afghanistan. Yeah. Everybody is worried, and this is the situation that comes to everybody in Afghanistan. Nobody is safe in Afghanistan.
We can communicate with them, but they are not really safe because they are like hiding in a basement out of Kabul.
The future of women and girls in Afghanistan is an uncertain and dark future because under the Taliban rules, girls aren't allowed to go to school after grade 6. And the Taliban wants to change the curriculum from the school, and after that the girls will be forever slaves for men. About 90% of Afghanistan people are under poverty line right now, and they can't afford food for their children. And that's a situation the families wants to sell their children in that circumstance. So some of the families wants to sell their girl child rather than their son. So it's very hard. You cannot imagine.
In other countries, getting education is normal. Everybody goes to school, university, and then master's degree and other. But in Afghanistan, to become a education person, you have to put your life in risk with the bomb attack, with suicide attack, with every challenging days to have your education degree.
Me and my husband already found a job here in the United States. Right now we are working as a pharmacy technician.
And your husband is also a doctor?
Yes, he's an orthopedic surgeon and he's working as a pharmacy technician here. The most difficult adjustment for me especially is getting a job in my profession. I want to get my medical license back and practice medicine here. For the adjustment with language, with adjustment with life in United States, everything. It was very hard, but for those people that it was very hard. Sometimes difficulty and challenges makes you very strong. And on that time, I was the one that I faced lots of challenges. And for me, I just took a notebook and pen and write all my challenges. And I turn a page and I write all the solution of those challenges in a time frame. And that's keep me, that plan helped me to manage, keep moving forward.
When I left Afghanistan, I was thinking that I'm a prisoner and now free, and I had both emotions. I was happy because I came to United States for my future life of my son, but also I was sad because I left everybody, my family, my coworkers, my every friends. I want to cry and cry. Slow, I think I'm here in the situation that is peaceful. Here is no war, so that's make me happy. One day I was very tired, and then my father called me. When I say for my father that I'm tired, my father told me, "Can I ask a question from you?" And my father told me, if there is an earthquake and your home getting damaged, and what you want to do? And I say for my father, I will escape to a safe place. And then my father told me, your situation is the same as that. You have to think the earthquake damaged your home and you escape to a safe place. You're very lucky.
I'm in a separate apartment. My mom and dad is with my brother in one apartment, and one family more with us. My sister, my elder sister, she's still in the hotel because she didn't find, she's a huge family, so that's why she didn't find any apartment. They are 7 person. Yeah, it's very difficult, the adjustment. The one thing is the language. The other thing is about being doctor. It's, I think, very difficult to being a doctor in America because some state didn't accept Afghans' diploma. So I'm trying to find another job. And also my husband is also a doctor. So we will try our best to be a doctor in America. So we'll do education to do our best to become a doctor in America.
My hope and dream for my both sons, I want them to get well-educated persons, reach their goals, and become a symbol for humanity at the future.
I want for my children to grow up in one country, with one language, with one culture. It's very difficult. I know the experience I have. It's very important. I want them to touch the sky.
We have to help Afghanistan women because if we think, for example, Afghanistan women like a person that drowning on the water.
My message for the people in Atlanta is that please support Afghan women. They need a lot of the support of every countries. It's very hard for them. In 20 years, most of girls, women have educated. They have job, just like me. And now everything is finished. When I talk with my colleagues, with my co-workers, they said everything is finished. We are nothing. So I feel so sad for them. So please support them. Support Afghan women.
I wrote down a few words. Dr. Jinnah Saidi said, "Sometimes difficulties make you strong. That's what keeps me moving forward." Thank you, Dr. Saidi. And the last one who spoke said, the Afghan women need help. So now let's hear from some of the people in our community who are coordinating assistance for the Afghan community. I want to welcome to the stage Alpa Amin, Executive Director of the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, Paige Mixon, CEO of New American Pathways, Dr. Hogai Nasseri, CEO of the Afghan American Alliance of Georgia, and our moderator, Amy Glennon, former publisher of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, our current IWF Georgia program chair, and the engine behind today. So. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Saleemah. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Dr. Jinnah Saidi. That video, when we put that together, and thanks to the Carter Center for letting us use the facilities there to do that, was really a moving day. The stories that we heard and the strength of these women was amazing. You all are working with these families every day and doing the on-the-ground work to try to make resettlement happen here. I'd like to start, just kind of go down the row and let each of you speak a minute about what your organization does and kind of give us a baseline of what you're seeing right now. And we'll kind of be brief on that, and then we'll move in. But I'll start with you, Alpa.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Alpa Amin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, otherwise known as GAIN. We were founded here in Atlanta in 2005 to fill a critical gap in legal services for vulnerable immigrants. We have been creating programs to this day that support survivors of human trafficking, families fleeing war-torn countries, and most recently, we launched a project in August of 2021 known as Project Ally to support our Afghan community. In the first week of operation, we received over 150 calls from around the world seeking support. Our goal through the hotline was to create a place for Afghan families here in Georgia to come for help. They had loved ones abroad, and they didn't know where to go or what to do. In the first 3 months of our project, we conducted over 300 legal screenings and filed over 200 humanitarian parole applications to reunite Afghan families. The work currently has shifted to focus on the families that we are seeing here in Georgia, and so it continues. And I'm proud to be here on the stage with partners who are in this fight with us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paige Emcee. I'm the CEO of New American Pathways. New American Pathways is a refugee and immigrant service organization. Our mission is to help refugees and Georgia thrive. We have been welcoming refugees to Atlanta in one form or another since 1981. So we've been around a while. We started receiving Afghan evacuees in September of 2021. We've welcomed 301 people from Afghanistan over the last, since September. Our last Afghan arrival from a military base happened on February the 19th. So we're welcoming folks to Atlanta. Just like you heard on the video, we are seeing some housing shortages in Atlanta, so we've been helping people first in temporary housing. We're now moving people into their permanent homes, registering children for school, getting documents, and people are starting to go to work, starting English classes, all those kinds of things you need to do to get settled in those first few months. Now families are really talking to us about their family back home, and also talking about their immigration status because our Afghan evacuees have come here on parole, which is not the same as refugee status. It's a temporary status, and so working with partners like GAIN and with our own immigration services program, we are now in the next phase really looking at family reunification, at asylum applications, special immigrant visa applications, and also transitioning from establishing safety and stability here in Atlanta to moving toward self-sufficiency, working, paying your own bills, going to school, navigating the community on your own. So that's where we are today. And it's been just an incredible experience over the last 4 or 5 months. And these families will be with us and working with us over the next 5 to 6 years.
Great. My name is Hogai Nasseri, and I'm a family physician here in Atlanta. I was born in Afghanistan. I came here when I was 5 years old, so I've been here, I guess, almost 50 years. And the poem about grandmothers was just so powerful. I have to say, my grandmother's side died of cholera when my father was 2 in Afghanistan. And my grandmother, Kaukaba, came over the mountains in the back of a truck after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. And that's how she ended up in the United States. So I actually think about both of them quite a bit as I go through trials and just difficulties here because they sacrificed so much. I think about what my parents sacrificed to bring me to the United States. In August of 2021, the unthinkable happened. So many of us just had hope that Afghanistan would not fall, that things would not go back to the dark ages, but it did. And a few of us here in Atlanta realized that other parts of the country were very organized. So the Afghan American diaspora in California, Virginia, New York, I was in a Slack group and I saw, oh my gosh, these guys are just amazing. And we looked around and we didn't see that in Atlanta. We didn't see Afghan Americans who've been here for a long time, banding together to help. So we decided to start a group, and we had 3 goals. One was to create a sense of community for new arrivals, so they would know that there was someone here who spoke their language, that could bring them a tray of food on the first day they're here that's Afghan food. We thought we would help connect people who want to volunteer to the resettlement agencies. And the thing is, Clarkston knows how to do this work. We are so fortunate in Atlanta. We have amazing resettlement agencies who've been doing this forever. And so we thought we'll just help direct people there because everybody wanted to help. And then our third goal was to fill gaps. Any gaps that were left by resettlement agencies, we thought we'll try to help out, you know, and see if we can take people to a doctor's appointment or do whatever. And I kept telling the folks in other parts of the country, and they were saying, we're doing this, and I said, we don't need to do that. Our resettlement agencies do all that. I mean, and they were like, just wait and see what happens. And they were so right. You know, the resettlement infrastructure was decimated under the Trump administration. You know, I was talking to Justin Howell the other day with IRC, and he said at the end of the Trump administration, he had 3 caseworkers, 3. And the IRC is a powerhouse in this field. So they had to, you know, scale up really quickly. And in the middle of a pandemic, with huge families coming in, and I asked him, I said, so tell me, how would you compare this to other situations? And he used 2 words. He said, unprecedented and historic. He said, and you know, just in 2021, the latter part of 2021, they got more refugees than they did in the previous 4 years. Okay, so imagine the strain that placed on everyone. Nobody was prepared for this. So all this is to say, our group ended up doing a lot more than just the 3 things we thought we were going to do. And fortunately, we were able to partner with folks like, I mean, your caseworker, Safia, I feel like she's my mother. She's so wonderful.
Everybody's mother.
Well, and she's very demanding, like my mother. So she's wonderful. But, you know, so a lot of people taught us a lot. We formed as a group, we're called the Afghan American Alliance, and we tried really hard to make sure, you know, all our volunteers, we have about 50 volunteers now, most of whom are not Afghan. They're just, you know, regular people who are very concerned. Some are my patients, I have to admit. I did not recruit them. They found us on their own. I just don't think that's right. It is hard, though, to set boundaries with them as volunteers when they are your patient, I have to say. But basically, we decided, you know, we're gonna try to help. And we found that there's so much need that it's very easy to make a difference. I mean, you just go talk to someone and you feel they have a problem you can solve. It's amazing, which has really helped a lot of us who have been so discouraged about the state of the world. So we provide furniture, we provide clothes, traditional clothes. We try to fill in the gaps.
Thank you. So let me jump in and take us up close. Paige, I'm going to start with you on the process. What happens? How far in advance do you hear that you have an Afghan family coming in, the need, how you respond, what those first few days are like? Can you describe what that looks like?
Sure. Well, I want to just talk about what it would be like typically, because when you talk to my colleague Justin at the IRC, this is a really different experience for us. So for a typical refugee family, we would be assigned the case, you know, months and months ahead of time. We'd be able to follow where they are on their path. And then about 2 weeks before they came, we would get notice that they were coming, and that 2-week period would be when we would secure the apartment and do all the things to prepare. As soon as the flights started coming to the United States, some folks from Afghanistan got right off the plane and came straight to the resettlement agency. Some people left the military base, and they could do that. Those that came through the military base, we would get about 2 days' notice. And so sometimes we didn't know people were coming at all, and they would just be in our lobby. And then we would have to apply to have the case assigned to us and find some type of emergency housing. And you know, we paid for it with private funds. The generosity of Atlanta helped us to be able to respond quickly because we didn't have a promise or commitment that the case would actually be assigned to us. So it has been a bit of a scramble. But you know, folks come in, one of the things we noticed is people really left with nothing. And in the time they were in the military base, maybe they got another outfit. You know, they came with very little. So really that beginning experience was about getting everybody's basic needs, getting some kind of housing situation very, very quickly. You know, talk about resilience and women. A lot of the women that we've served, especially at the beginning, because they were a high priority for resettlement, did all of this pregnant. So they flew here pregnant. They lived in a tent on a military base, pregnant. They came and sat in our lobby for hours, pregnant, and they're giving birth in a new country, in a new language, with small children, going from a temporary housing to another, and just really amazing, inspiring moms who, despite all of this, are very excited about this process. We also saw that immediately, once you get food, clothing, shelter, I want to apply for my family. That's immediately, my family back home. I need help with my family back home. And it's just kind of been this very new, very different adventure that I feel like we are having with Afghan families together, learning and navigating a process that's very different than we've ever been through before, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Let me ask you, Alpa, from a legal standpoint. So you all are taking them in, getting food, getting shelter, getting this, but we're dealing with an unusual refugee situation, an unusual legal situation. What is the path to citizenship, to asylum? Where do you take it from there?
I think I would start with acknowledging that we often hear the term refugee, and in this situation, refugees and asylees are essentially the same person. Refugees are people who are able to seek protection or ask for help abroad. When they arrive here in the United States, they have immigration status, they're connected to a resettlement agency, eligible for certain benefits. Asylees, on the other hand, are people who have to travel here to the US, ask for protection here, and then go through a very lengthy process to obtain the status. So what we know is that in this current situation, there are at least 120,000 people who were evacuated from Afghanistan. Around 70,000 of them have arrived here in the United States, and what we know is that about 40,000 of those individuals are going to need to find some form of permanent immigration status to remain here. Paige mentioned that a lot of these arrivals are parolees. That means the government has allowed them to enter the United States for a temporary period of time, for 2 years. Now, if they don't have family members who can petition for them, if they don't qualify for a special immigrant visa, then their only course of action is to apply for asylum. Currently, there are over 1 million case backlog in the immigration court system. Families are waiting 7 to 10 years for a decision on their case.
What happens in that interim between you have 2 years and we're backlogged for 7 years?
So in this situation, the government has decided to expedite Afghan asylum cases. Like Paige just mentioned, though, a lot of these families have arrived with very little documentation. So the process of applying for asylum is lengthy, but it is complex. It requires evidence to corroborate your claim. It requires documentation, identification that many of our clients don't have. And with the current process of expediting cases, these families could have their immigration case or asylum case heard in 45 days. That doesn't give organizations like ours enough time to prepare. And it doesn't give us enough time to explain to them even the process that they are about to go through.
It's an enormously complex situation that I think most of us just kind of don't quite understand what it takes. Talk a little bit about what your organization most needs. If we could help you right now, what would that look like?
To find an alternate to having to seek asylum here in the US. Currently, there are talks of an Afghan Adjustment Act that would allow these families to find a different pathway to remaining here in the US. They would still have to file applications, provide support, but they would be able to bypass the asylum process, which again, because of the length of time, means that they might be separated from family members that they've left abroad for a very long time. It also means that because their immigration status isn't solidified, they don't have an identification, they can't get a driver's license, they can't open up a bank account. again, under the parole status, they may be able to do some of these things, but that status is up in 2 years. So if you are talking about finding safety and refuge here in the US, you need to be able to do those things, and you need to be able to have proper a legal pathway to do so.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, I want to come back to you because you uniquely started an Afghan-American alliance, and you jumped in not knowing you were going to form this organization, and now you have it.
Right.
So you're off and running. You are actually a doctor as your day job. Talk about that experience from an Afghan woman and what you're seeing.
So, you know, if you're Afghan and you're an Afghan woman, you've been traumatized multiple times. So I was very fortunate. My family came here in the 70s, but I remember as a young girl sitting there in front of my family's huge TV, watching Peter Jennings announce the invasion of Afghanistan. Watching what's happening in Ukraine is a re-triggering of that. Now you have social media, you have all these ways of getting information. Back then, we would wait for phone calls that, a cousin had been arrested or that my uncle had disappeared. You'd get these late night phone calls, so all of that comes back. If you work with some of these families, you find out a lot of them speak Urdu, which is the language of Pakistan. It's because they fled Afghanistan, either under the Russians or under the Taliban, and went to Pakistan for a while, and then finally came back. So now they fled again. A lot of them have injuries that the men have injuries from 2 wars ago. When you look at what is happening now, we met a family the other day. It's a blended family because there's it's a family of like 3 sisters and their children, and one of the sisters, only the husband and 1 child made it out. The mom and the other children got left at the airport. They got separated. How do you even comprehend that? They spend every night calling on the phone or during the day with their family and hear about how hungry they are and how they're scared. We were fortunate to work with Georgia State, our organization did, and we assisted 6 Afghan students, female students, who were at the Asian University for Women in Bangladesh, but because of COVID, they were studying remotely from Afghanistan. And their president in Bangladesh got them all evacuated at like the 11th hour. It was harrowing. They spent 42 hours on a bus. No food, no water, nothing. Their cell phones died. They had to find ways to get them charged. They would know where to go. If you talk to them, it's phenomenal. It's amazing what they went through. They ended up at a base in Wisconsin for almost 3 months, and we worked really hard to get them out of there because we had slots for them at Georgia State. That Georgia State has given them dorm rooms, has given them everything. So the women in my book club on my street, we all hosted them for a week so that they would get to know our families, get acclimated. And these young women are so resilient. But one of them calls me periodically because her brother is being hunted by the Taliban. And she calls me and she's like, last time they came by his house, they said they're going to take his son. He's in the 5th grade. The father is in hiding, moving, and they're all suffering from PTSD. And when I went to visit them, they told me, I said, how are you sleeping? Trying to broach the topic. And they all told me, they cry every night. That's the only way they can get to sleep. And I said, well, don't go on social media. Why? And they said, they see about the bombing here. They said, people here don't understand what's happening there. They think, everything's calm now. It's not. And they said, they call me auntie, and they said, Khala Hogait, that's the only way we know our family's okay. And the young woman with the brother said, when I see my brother is online, I know he's alive. And she said she talked to her brother's daughter, who was just sobbing into the phone because she was an A student and can't go to school anymore. So this is what they're dealing with on top of trying to acclimate to life here. Then I took 2 of them to the grocery store, and on the way back, one of them said, I have a very personal question to ask you, Khala Hogait. And I said, oh my God, I don't want to, am I prepared for this? And she said, I want to grow my money. How can I invest? And first of all, she was asking absolutely the wrong person. But secondly, I said, what money? She said, well, there's this welcome money I have. She said, I have to send some back home, but I want to own my own business and I want to get a car. I said, okay, forget the car part. I said, you have to pay insurance, you have to do this, forget the car part. I said, but she said, I wanted to open a restaurant. I said, this is the way, I mean, these are people, they are so resilient and they have so much gumption. You know, one of them's already gotten her license, even though we told her, don't get your, she went ahead and got her drive, she took her test. They have their passports, fortunately. But for the families that don't have passports, they're having trouble getting their driver's licenses, getting ID, even though they should be able to with their I-94 card. But it depends on which DMV office they go to in Atlanta as to whether or not they can get it, you know. And that's something that the caseworkers understand, and they know which one to take them to. You know, but it shouldn't be that way, right?
Yeah. Let me do this because I want to leave time for questions, but I also want to ask each of you, if I was doing a rapid fire about, this is a powerful group of type A women in here and watching on video, if they could help in any way. And you can get to help information from your program and the QR code there, so you've got that with you. But if I said quickly, what could they do right now to help this situation or help your organizations, if they could, without creating more hassles? One of y'all mentioned when we spoke earlier that even having time to interview people to fill open positions at your organizations is difficult. So how can we help and not be a burden?
Well, on this topic of mental health, as an executive, I'm very concerned about the emotional toll that this is taking on the people that we've tasked with serving the community. And so opportunities that can open up wellness activities or mental health screenings, these are things that we want to be able to and we need to be offering to our staff so that they can continue to take care of themselves and take care of others.
You know, we have a bunch of different ways to help on our website, but something that we're launching that has come up is a fund so that we can provide affidavits of support to Afghans and also parents from Central America who are trying to apply for relatives to come over and have to be able to prove that they can financially support them. So we can provide an affidavit of support, and we're raising money for a fund for affidavit of support. So this is a program we're going to be launching in the next couple of weeks. This is going to be our biggest priority. For folks who don't have a network here, it's hard for them to find organizations to sponsor them and to show that they have enough financial wellness to bring their family members here.
Okay.
I have like 10 things, but I'll try to keep it to like 4. I really need donated empty retail space for storage. It kills me to pay for storage right now that we're actually paying for these little storage units that, and we could get everybody to use that space. I mean, Refugee Women's Network could use it. We could just have this communal space. They do this in California. I hacked into their WhatsApp group, so I kind of stalk them to see what they're doing so I can learn and not just make the same mistakes. We need trauma counseling, EMDR. That can be done in a bilingual manner. It has been shown to work. We have so many people who have suffered trauma. We had a young woman take an overdose the other day of her mother's amitriptyline because she's just so depressed. And you know, there isn't enough of that for Americans. You know, so imagine what we're running into there. We need dental care. The amount of dental cases we're seeing where that stuff can turn into sepsis and kill somebody. You know, I mean, that's serious. That would be great. We need help with logistics. I mean, I'm a doctor. I don't know how to do logistics. I don't know how to, I mean, the number of retired people I've got delivering furniture is just unsafe, you know, so anybody that could, it is, and a lot of them are my patients. I feel terrible. I'm looking at them thinking, this is not safe for you to be doing this, lifting this sofa. Honestly, a lot of them are Stephanie Davis's friends, and, you know, they're wonderful, but we need, you know, I've tried to get high school teams that periodically they can help. I would love a connection to a veterans group that is interested in serving this community. You know, we need money to help pay for people to get their educational credentials verified. So if you had a degree in Afghanistan, but you left suddenly, you didn't bring all this paper, even if you did bring your diploma, you have to pay a service to validate all those credentials. It costs like, I think, $600, $700.
It depends on the type of evaluation you're getting.
You know, to do that. You know, and so they're like, well, I want to complete my degree. But, you know, and we've got people who are willing to work with them at, you know, Georgia Perimeter, Georgia State, but that is a step, that's a barrier. So if we had funding where we could, you know, say, okay, we can do this for 4 people, that would be great. So, you know, there's really no end to the ways that people can help.
Great, thank you. Let me, I think we've got a few minutes to take a couple questions if there are some in the audience. Can't really see out there. Up at the top.
Hi, my name is Chloe Barzi. I'm with Accenture, and we are trying to mobilize to help, but it's been hard to even understand all the ways that we can tactically help. And so I hear what you're saying. We're working with the IRC, but there's still lots of ways. Like you mentioned, people are coming with no clothes. People are coming, people need food. I mean, there are things we could probably do right now today that would make a difference. I mean, how many of us have clothes in our closet that we could offer to donate? I mean, what are the, how do we find out the most, I know you ran down a list of a few things, but the most tactical, tangible things we could do like today and tomorrow, because we're helping with we're helping outfit apartments. But I know that there's so much more, and I think all the agencies are overwhelmed. So I'm trying to find, like, how can we bring some of this together to make it really tangible and tactical for our young people to be able to help as well?
So one of the things I would say is the 4 resettlement agencies in Atlanta, we've done something that no one else has done in other cities, and we formed a cooperative so that we could manage logistics and donations together. It's called the Welcome Co-op. The Welcome Co-op does have a wish list on its webpage of what it needs at any given time. It has a clothing thrift store that is housed at the International Rescue Committee, and it has a furniture warehouse. So if you want to donate household items and clothing, one of the things the resettlement agencies decided is if we combine that together and we have logistic, I so relate to what you say, because we had Sophia, everybody's mom, carrying couches a few years ago, and we said that won't stand.
She's in her 70s. Not that it means she can't lift sofas. I'm not saying that, but it's just not a good idea.
Yeah, it's not a good idea. And so us having a concentrated logistics team is what we have, but that's allowed us to, if you give stuff to the co-op, it goes to all 4 of us. And also Amazon is our friend. We have Amazon wish lists on our website. The co-op has it on theirs, so you don't necessarily have to go grabbing donations and driving them all over town. Just order them and they'll show up for us, and that works very, very well. Another thing is, I think that all 4 resettlement agencies in Georgia have been completely overwhelmed by the generosity of Atlanta community, and we ask for your patience because we had to build a plane, fly it, and get people to help us at the same time. So if we've been a little slow to respond, it's because we've had to collect ourselves. And so they're like, at our organization, New American Pathways, we just put our volunteer orientations on our website. You can come to the orientation and we'll tell you what volunteer opportunities we have. You can come by, it's a Zoom based. So, you know, that's what we've got.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry we've run out of time, but I want to thank you all. No, this has been great, and if any of you or all of you can hang around for the reception later, I'm sure there's people who will want to talk with you. We'll sign off with this thought. David Miliband, who is the global head of the IRC, wrote in the New York Times the other day and mentioned that there are right now 31 million refugees and asylum seekers in the world, and that is unprecedented. And we're now seeing, I think the number was over 1 million leaving Ukraine as of this morning. The authoritarian regimes that are moving into these areas and forcing this kind of exodus from these countries is creating unbelievable challenges. And I want to thank you all for being here, because you are on the front lines of doing this, doing the kind of work that all of us need to support and need to get behind you on, and this wouldn't work without you. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Alpa Amin. Thank you, Padia Mixon. Thank you, Dr. Hogai Nasiri. Thank you, Amy Glennon. A lot of good information. I took down the need for better coordination of services, the need for storage space, bilingual trauma counseling, legal and legislative support, dental care, furniture delivery, emotional and well-being caretaker services, veterans, money, Amazon wish list, the Welcome Co-op, lots of ways to help, lots of ways to plug in. I want to meet Sophia at some point. I think we'll close on the mothers in a little while. Thank you very much to our panelists, and if you missed any of that, if you look in your program, there's a QR code, and that will give you a link to all of the organizations that have appeared today. If you don't know what a QR code is, ask your neighbor. It's very easy. Don't worry. We're here. We got you. We got you. And now a word from presenting sponsor, Georgia Power.
We're powering tomorrow, today, for our families, our businesses, our environment. Georgia Power is investing in infrastructure to ensure a more resilient power grid, delivering the energy you need 24/7, 365 days a year. It's why we've built a balanced mix of hydro, solar, and nuclear power to provide carbon-free energy for our future. And why we're committed to protecting our state's natural beauty, keeping up and caring for thousands of acres of parks and lakes for all Georgians. We've also installed high-speed EV charging stations across the state, giving Georgia's drivers the confidence to go electric, all while providing flexible rate plans and the highest level of customer service and satisfaction. A clean energy future means a lot to Georgia and to us, because we know the sustainable energy needed to prosper tomorrow will come from the energy we put in today. Georgia Power, powering tomorrow, today.
Thank you. All right, before we have our final session, we're going to take a quick break. Quick break. That's just enough time to go to the bathroom and come right back. Download a QR code, 10 minutes or less. The bathrooms are upstairs right behind me. We'll be right back here in how long, ladies and gentlemen? 10 minutes, thank you. 10 minutes. Thank you, welcome back. You did great with the 10 minutes, great. Now if you will just come on in and take a seat. Samaya, Alpa, if I know your name, Candy, I'm gonna call it out. Come on, bring a friend, Monica. All of my friends out there, bring it back in, welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you all so much. I want to thank two presenting sponsors right now. The first is Liz Blake, who I believe has just arrived. And we also want to thank Kaiser Permanente, who has given us a video, and we'll watch that now. Back to our screens.
You might have noticed most things in life have gotten smarter, more personalized, and more convenient. Now your healthcare, not so much. One healthcare provider is out to change that. Kaiser Permanente. With our integrated healthcare model, your primary care physician can coordinate your care with any specialist you need. Our board-certified physicians work in over 50 specialties and coordinate care with nurses and other team members to help you be your healthiest. And they're all connected to your health records. So you don't have to give your life story every time you see a doctor. That means nothing slips through the cracks, and prescriptions get filled quickly and correctly. We've packed all that seamless healthcare into a simple app that fits neatly on your smartphone. So go with the plan that gives you the personalized, convenient, flexible care you need to stay your healthiest. Go with Kaiser Permanente.
Thank you. And now, for our final session of today, we're going to take a look at what female entrepreneurship looks like right now and right here. The courage it takes to seize the moment in business, and even against the toughest of odds and during a global pandemic. Our panelists include 2 IWF Georgia members, a financial leader supporting small businesses, and a newly minted entrepreneur. Please welcome to our stage Tracy Grace, CEO of IBEX IT Business Experts, Grace Fricks, President and CEO of Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs, Inc., Malika Sylvain, founder and owner of her own new company, Shared Demands, and our moderator, Kadir Abdurrahim, Chief Equity Officer and Executive Director for the City of Atlanta. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Mayor Andre Dickens, I bring greetings. I'm excited for you all to hear the stories of our panelists today who are women business owners seizing the moment against big odds. To set the context for the panel, I want to share a couple of statistics that will resonate throughout the stories shared today. These are staggering statistics to me. According to the National Association of Women Business Owners, 49% of those starting a business during 2020 were women, which is up 27% in recent years. Minority women are driving new business because they have had to. Nearly 47% of businesses started by women in the past year are minority owned. I know, I hear the wows. 66% of women that started their businesses last year are sole proprietors. They're doing it all on their own. Our data tells us this new business creation is happening because 50% of women want more control over their work schedule. Yes, we do. Some lost their jobs, and 37% were looking to improve their financial opportunities. While the last 2 years really have not been easy, some silver linings are starting to shine through. Today's panelists, Malika Sylvain, Grace Fricks, and Tracy Grace represent those shining moments. Malika is the founder and owner of Shared Demands, a home organization service. Please do not bombard her after this panel, because it is a service we all need. Grace Fricks is the president and CEO of ACE, Access Capital for Entrepreneurs. And Tracy Grace is the president and CEO of IBEX IT Services. Thank you all for being with us today. Can we start off with each of you sharing your background and story? Grace, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm very happy to be here with these wonderful women today. You know, when I was thinking about resilience on the way down, I thought, you know, this is going to be such a charge for me, because that's one of the most important things about resilience, is that you get it from other strong women. So I'm the founding CEO of ACE, or Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs, which is a community development financial institution. What we do is we help entrepreneurs grow their businesses with capital combined with coaching and connections. Now, our particular target market, no surprise to you, is women, entrepreneurs of color, and also entrepreneurs who have low, moderate incomes. And that whole group gets classified as the underserved. And you can add the rest of it as the underserved by the traditional financial system. We serve 68 counties in Georgia. Metropolitan Atlanta is where we do the most. We started in the back of my house with $50,000. And that was when we were making loans for like $5,000 a piece. And now we've done $135 million worth of loans. So, yeah. And I'm so excited to be with you, but mostly with the entrepreneurs.
Yes. Thank you for that amazing story, Grace. Tracy, can you share your story?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. I always get so excited to tell the story because I think that entrepreneurship is a wonderful opportunity for many, not for everyone, but for many. And so I like to expose how that can happen for you. So most of my life, I worked in corporate America. I rose through the ranks. I worked hard, got there early, stayed late. And my last corporate position, I was a VP at a Dutch consulting firm. And we specialized in best practices and process improvement. And I thought I was going to set the world on fire. The downturn of the economy occurred. And so I had to figure out what else we could do at that company in order to really keep business going. I found an opportunity in health IT. It was when all hospital systems were migrating from paper-based to electronic healthcare records. And so I started finding staffing companies that could staff the opportunities I was finding. Well, back in the Netherlands, they couldn't quite understand the resourcefulness that I had and the model that I created because that started outperforming their core business, and they didn't like it. So they called me in, and I thought I was going to get an award for, quite the opposite. And they said, Tracy, that work you're doing in all those hospitals? I said, yes. And they said, well, we don't want that business anymore. And I said, are you kidding? Are you joking? And they said, no. If anything bad happens in those hospital systems, it'll be a black spot on your career. And so that was the most shocking day of my life. I got on the flight home and I just was distressed. And then I said, you know what? If I keep doing this, if I keep working for someone else and I keep doing this, I'm always going to have to be at their mercy. And so maybe this is an opportunity. So I got home and I told my husband, and he cheered. He said, finally, you've made so many companies, millions of dollars. Now it's time for you to do it on your own. And so I took that opportunity, started not with $50,000, $225, got my business license, but I started with one customer. I went to my main customer and I said, Quint no longer wants your business. If I were to start my own company, would you stay with me? And they said, well, Tracy, as long as our service levels don't drop, we don't care. So I started with one client, and today we've been on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies for 4 years straight, and we're about to be 10 years old. Wow.
Thank you, Tracy, for that story. Malika, let's hear your story.
So I come from humble beginnings. I am from Michigan, and got a college education, got married really young to a Marine, and we moved around a lot. We lived in 7 states in like 6 years, and had 2 children pretty early in our marriage, and initially thought I wanted to stay home. Have always had an entrepreneur spirit. My dad was an entrepreneur. My grandparents were entrepreneurs, kind of by necessity. And after my education, got a college degree and started very much like you, kind of going up in the ranks of different organizations, mostly nonprofit. I have always had a spirit of giving back. I've always wanted a career with meaning, which can be difficult at times. When you got to pay the bills, you get a job where you can get a job. So, but been very blessed in that way. So, ended up at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, another nonprofit, Europe. Worked my way up to a director of operations. I've always been very organized. Has been organizing friends' closets probably for the last like 15 years or so, kind of word of mouth, as a side hustle. and got divorced and had to kind of reinvent myself. If any of you all know anything about being in a Marine Corps family, you get used to a lot of the discounts and the privileges that come with men and women serving countries. So I was like, okay, benefits have changed, salary has changed, things like that. So moving forward, I'm raising my girls. Their dad is in a different state, and I had the opportunity to be promoted pretty quickly with my last career, and the pandemic hit. And because I just got promoted, excuse me for being a little arrogant, but I was like, oh, I'll be fine. Not so much. I got laid off. More than half of my staff got laid off, and said, okay, God, what's your will? My kids were in college. I had to, help pay tuition and some of their expenses as well, pay mortgage, bills, and needless to say, unemployment doesn't last very long. And so I prayed about it. I kind of had the LLC on the background from years ago, and I thought I wanted to start my own business, but really had to grind with supporting my family. Both girls were home during the pandemic, and I started cleaning out my own house and said, I've got to figure out how to make this happen for others, the feeling of being decluttered and the feeling of getting rid of things, and at the time being able to give to people less fortunate. So I got my business license in order, marched up to the county court, got it signed off, and it was right around the holidays, and so I started giving out what I call gift of time. And with the gift of time, it was organizing services. Also being in other people's houses during the pandemic, how do I make this safe? So sought out, question and answers on the CDC website. Anyway, word started spreading very quickly. So from December to March, the phone literally started ringing off the hook, all referrals. We are now a year and a half in. I am booked through March. I have consultation time, but can't not have another client until April 1st, which is a complete blessing. 99% of my clients are referrals. So there's a level of trust and respect and credibility that comes with, well, if I used her, you need her, give her a call. So that's kind of what brought me here. I was kind of looking for a job at the beginning of the pandemic, and when things started really progressing, I'm now branching a consignment boutique because I have all these clothes from all these closets, and some of them are really nice things, and I'm like, how about I make you money while I make money? And so look for shared closet consignment coming soon.
Thank you, Malika. Before joining the city, I was a startup CEO for a nonprofit, and I very much consider myself an entrepreneur. And as I look into the audience today, I see one or two mentors that helped to change my life as I led that work. And I can't say enough about how impactful mentors are. Can you talk a little bit about who helped you get where you are today and the access necessary to accomplish what you have accomplished and ensure continued success? So who have your mentors, or who are your mentors, and how have they helped you kind of access certain spaces that have contributed to your success?
Well, I want to tell you about one mentor, again, because I was thinking about her today. For any of you that have heard me speak before, you would know that I usually have bright red, blood red fingernails whenever I'm speaking. And the reason that I did that was because my mentor, her name was Annette Bowling. She is no longer with us, but she had these dragon lady fingernails. And so whenever I had to do something I was uncomfortable with, and the stats show that public speaking is one of those things, I would always have my fingernails red because if I got nervous, I could look down and I'd go, I got this, Annette. So they're not red today. So I feel like that's a symbol of some kind of transition where I don't need that. So she helped me with my own self-esteem and courage. Now, I will say one thing about mentors, and I've had several in my life, different kinds that access banks, because even though I started a financial institution, which is a nonprofit actually, I'm not a banker or an accountant. So I needed to have entree into certain circles. And so I've had quite a few, but the most powerful ones have been not mentors, but I think they're classified as sponsors. And they don't have to be older. They can be younger. And I know that I help women myself, and I'm helped. So I think we're moving into this time where it's not just one particular mentor, that it is, it's a give and a take, because so many of us have lots of different connections, and that's what it takes to be successful. Not just the capital, not just the education, it's connections.
Malika?
I would ditto that statement. Grace Jackson, who invited me here today, which I'm so gracious of, she actually was one of my old bosses. And so she's now become a friend, and she definitely is an inspiration. I would say I call him my bonus dad. I lost my father in high school, and this gentleman has been with my mom for several years, and he has helped small businesses grow, coincidentally. And why I didn't think to call him 2 years ago, I'd have probably been more advanced, but he's given me some awesome advice the last few months that has started working, as well as, I call him my other half. He's so supportive of me. You know, when you leave a job making a certain amount and you become an entrepreneur, financially, it can be a struggle. However, he's always speaking confidence in my ear, and he's my biggest cheerleader. And of course, everything is confidential with my clients. He doesn't know their names or what's going on, but I'll tell him, my client today, you know, said this or did that, or this happened, and he just listens intently. And of course, he loves it because the house stays organized. So I would say those three people, someone that's kind of in my pocket, close to my pocket, but also a professional mentor is also pretty important.
Tracy?
So about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I heard Tyler Perry speak, and he said something I never forgot, and I kind of grabbed onto it. I really needed it growing my business. But he said that there are different people that come into your life for different seasons, and he characterized it as a tree. I hear some of you guys saying, yeah, you've heard it before, right? So some are leaves, you know, they're there for a season. Others are branches, sometimes they crack off. And then you have the roots that really grab into the soil. They need the nourishment. And I think of my mentors, that's probably not a great, but you get where I'm going with it, right? But my mentors come in for seasons, and I think I have a small talent of spotting when they are in front of me. And so I don't actively seek mentorship programs, but when I find a person that I feel as though there's a lot of nourishment I can get from them, I can grab on, but I think it's mutual at that point. And so I think for mentoring, that it doesn't always have to be a formalized program, but there has to be a sense that this person and you get along well enough that there's some give and take there. And I also feel that with the mentors I've had, that they get stuff from me and I get stuff from them. Those are the best times. So I will say, growing my business, about 70% of the work we do right now is federal government contracting, and I'm not military, not government, anything. So it was a very difficult time trying to figure out how to work with the federal government. And so I would go to any and every information session I could just to grasp knowledge. And I'd meet all kinds of people. You know, I'm good at networking and meeting people. And I met a gentleman who was a former Army Ranger. And for some reason, I got him and he got me. He reminded me of my dad, and my dad passed away. And so, but I got him, and a lot of people don't get him because he's so harsh. So I developed a rapport with him, and anytime I'd have a question, I would email him and call him, and he would answer, well, Tracy, you know you have to do this. And for some reason, it just worked. So he fed a lot of knowledge into me, and I was able to get it. He said, I like you because you listen. And so, I'm a good listener. My parents taught me how to listen well, and so I used a lot of that mentoring. But I think what's also important is when you get, you also have to give. So I have now formulated a system where I informally will bring in female business owners that I believe are pretty high potential with federal government, and I'll actually bring them into my sales meetings, give them access to my accounting folks so that as they're working on bids, they know how to do them. And so I just think it's a revolving circle. So for me, mentoring, people have come in for seasons and taught me phenomenal things.
Thank you, Tracy, for reminding us that we definitely need to pour into people as much as people have poured into us. That's a great reminder. One of the emerging themes that I'm hearing today across all of you wonderful ladies is that you all are very much futuristic thinkers, thought leaders. You essentially disrupted yourselves before disruption could happen to you, which says to me, you all are change agents. So talk to us about how you navigated change during the pandemic. And Malika, we'll start with you this time.
Wow, that's a loaded question because I literally am in the space where I could be infecting myself and my family. So I would say my faith, of course, would be first. I would say that you got to do research. One thing that my dad always taught me was never go into business with something that you can't do yourself. And so, I'm in the closets, I'm in the garages, but I'm also managing. I would learn how to do my own payroll. I've had to learn so many things, intricate parts of my business, because initially couldn't hire, didn't have the money to hire. And now are looking for people to work for me and with me. And so I would just say the research, keeping your faith, and on top of research, staying competitive, competitive pricing with other organizing companies. What makes me so unique compared to someone else? And a lot of people think organizing, hoarding. That's not necessarily true. I have, single parents, families that, they're just so busy. Baby boomers are starting to transition into other homes, or their families have moved out and they need to downsize. So making sure staying kind of ahead of the trends of organizing, if that makes sense, in my research. So, and also being very versed of what types of products I can bring and supplies that I can bring to people's homes that make sense for their space. So I would say that.
Thank you. Tracy?
So about 4.5 years, everything's 4.5 years ago. I'm noticing but that's when we started, upward trajectory. So I had a capabilities briefing with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, UPMC, and I was pitching our IT services, and they said, Tracy, we are too large to work with you from an IT perspective. We work with IBM, but I really think you guys are a high potential company, so we'd like to do something with you. Our supplier diversity group is looking to develop a software system to help us manage our diverse suppliers. Do you think that's something that your group could do? And I said, well, maybe. Let me go back and talk to them, because I didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. But I did, and we had a software developer that we partnered with that had a base system that I felt that we could use to do this. So we were able to do that. We were successful. We launched the system, but we realized in those discussions that once other hospital systems realized that they had developed one, they all kept coming to them for best practices, for information. Who did this? Can we have access? And so they, based on our partnership, told us, you know what, there are bigger fish to fry out there. You guys can continue to own the code and all the ideology, use that and take it to market. So that was a huge blessing. But the challenge was the system that we developed was just for one. In order to build an enterprise system that, in my idea, was one to many, we had to redevelop the system. So this system we just launched, called Certifiably Diverse, at the end of last year, it was completely bootstrapped. So bootstrap means that you are taking your own funding to fund a software system. And so that's very stressful because all your profits are going all into your research. But I said, if I'm going to bet on anyone, I'm going to bet on myself. So I mentioned that we launched that during the pandemic. It gave us a real opportunity to buckle down, figure out what the strategy was, how are we going to be successful with this. And so as an entrepreneur, going from doing a lot of work in technology, sure, a lot of training work we did, but to become a software development organization, it is completely different. So I had to learn. I was running the project myself initially until I could hire other people. And so now today, I know more than I ever could have imagined about agile software development and everything else. But we have transformed now, and I've been able to attract super talented people. One gentleman is a principal architect that came over to us after his company, Green Sky, sold to Goldman Sachs. And he said, I wanted a safe home where I could work in and do something good. And so our supplier diversity vendor management system is built to help diversity within suppliers and how companies interact with diverse suppliers. So we're trying to move that needle in many ways.
Wow.
So that's the transformation we've done. So my focus is there now.
Wow. Grace?
Our type of organization, and there aren't that many in the country. We are part of an industry that has about 1,300 lenders, debt capital providers, that either grow small businesses or do things like affordable housing. And in Georgia, there's only 4 of us that do small business lending, because small business lending is a lot more risky than real estate lending. And so we're what I call counter-cyclical. So when there's a recession or when there's something like the pandemic, your traditional financial services start tightening in because they don't want to take any risk. And that creates opportunity for us. So we grew dramatically over the last 2 years. But I think the thing that is the most important that our organization did, and I just have to say that I did, is I found out from my board chair that there was back then, this Chinese virus that was coming to the United States. And lo and behold, I called one of my grant writer who used to work in epidemiology, and he said, I'll research it and get back to you. Then that was on a Saturday morning I talked to him, and by Sunday morning he said, Grace, there's something to this. It is here in the United States. So we immediately started paying attention. When we paid attention, we made sure that all of our staff were outfitted to work from home. And then the other thing that I did that's probably the most important is we asked our staff to call personally every single client who were also borrowers and find out what was going on for them, what they were hearing, what they were thinking, and to offer them, this will tell you how early it was, offer them 1 month of deferment. So that was very early in the process. So that gave us all this information about our borrowers, but it also educated our full staff about how our clientele were feeling, which are small businesses. So from there, everything started escalating. We made sure everybody could work from home, and we only had like 3 people who were not already outfitted for remote work. But then the other thing is I just made the decision, we were gonna do no layoffs. So over our Zooms, I said, Ace, you have my commitment. We're doing no layoffs. And also, don't worry about your PTO or paid time off. Don't pay attention to it. You do what you need to do, because moms and dads, but the families needed to be paying attention to what was going on with their children. And as you probably, some of you remember, you know, one school district was open, one was remote. It was just a nightmare. And so I needed to reassure my staff that we have your back. I got your back. So therefore, you can take care of the people. And that's what they did. And we went from 91 clients or new borrowers before the pandemic, and last year we did 787 loans. Yes. So it worked, taking care of them.
As we wrap up, we have maybe a couple minutes before we need to close and ask questions. But you know, one of the things that I heard from a resilience standpoint, two or three quick words. Malika, I heard faith from you. Tracy, I heard innovation. And Grace, I heard kindness and being human-centric. And that allowed you and your business to be resilient. So I thank all of you ladies for being here today and inspiring us and sharing your courageous stories. Before we end, do we have any questions from the audience?
Will you ask them how many small business owners?
Okay.
Thank you, ladies. My name is Susan Bonds McCulloch. I am the president and ED at Dress for Success Atlanta. So many of our ladies are trying their best to start their own businesses. And we host all sorts of classes, all sorts of education. I know you all think all we do is dress ladies, right? But we do all sorts of things to help them. I came from corporate America. I now run this organization. I've helped small businesses, but I've never started one. So what would be your number one piece of advice for us to give those ladies?
And before anyone answers, can we ask the question, if you own a small business in the audience, just raise your hand. Grace wants to know. Thank you.
So I would say again, research, research, research. Know what you're getting yourself into. Know kind of what you need to get started. Cover your legal bases, LLC, corporation, sole proprietor, I can't, you know what I'm saying, sorry. Registering your business, getting an EIN number so that you can file taxes. It's really important. And then, you know, coming up with a budget. How much do you need to get started? Being realistic. And I would even say project it. I did mine quarterly. There are some times of the year where we're busier than others, and so I'll need more team members than others, or my expenses are different times of the year. So I would say research and know what you're getting into, and have a passion for it. If you don't have a passion for it, I feel like you won't be as committed, and you may not see the hard times can be very scary, and it can make you say, you know what, I'm done with this, or this is too difficult. So I would say have a passion for whatever it is that you're going into, along with the research part.
For me, it would be know where you're strong and where you're not. So if you are not a great accountant, then you need to find someone who can help you with that, because it could be the downfall of your business. As I was growing, I did a lot of it myself with a couple of part-time people until I got to 1 million. I worked my fanny off. It was 3 a.m. till I don't know what time at night to make it happen. So it was definitely a labor of love. At the point where I started getting full-time people placed, then I could start hiring folks. But there was one, and I always tell people about this because I think it's important to know, there was one scenario where the government sent me a payment erroneously of over $100,000, and it was, the DUNS number was off by like 2 numbers. So I had an acting CFO who was supposed to help me balance my books, and he hadn't done it in about a quarter. So I was using my bank account statement as my balance, right? So, and I'm very honest about this. To this day, it hurts me to think about it. But I used that to hire someone that I couldn't afford. And so it was almost the death of my company. That next year, I worked so hard, I made like 1.28 million. So I went up, but it was just sheer will not to fail. So saying that, I did the accounting, it's not my strong suit. I knew at that point in time I needed someone. I was able to hire the gentleman who helped me in my past staff. A lot of my projects actually came to help me for a month, got my book straight, and then I was able to hire him because of that. So partner with people that can help you fill your gaps. It doesn't necessarily have to be that if you don't have cash, you can't bring in a consultant, but you can partner with people who have similar companies but have different weaknesses. So I would say know what your weakness is, fill that gap, and you'll be a lot more successful a lot quicker.
One more thing, self-care. When you're an entrepreneur, you forget to take days off. I started taking 2 days off like I would at a regular job, and it has saved my sanity. So the clients will be there. You tell them what your operation hours are. So self-care.
Grace?
As Kadira said, 96% of all small businesses in Georgia and in Atlanta are sole proprietors. And when you look at the women, just the women data, what you see is that there, especially in Atlanta, a lot of sole proprietors, a lot of women are opening businesses. However, they are like number 25 in the number of employees. So they're not growing, and the revenue is about 15 in the scale for the states. So you've got people have a lot of businesses, they're not hiring other people, and they've got smaller businesses. So from my viewpoint, and I think your viewpoint, that's opportunity to help people to grow and to step into that gap. And so from my viewpoint, there's a lot of resources, and I applaud you for what you're doing. And we have 2 women's business centers, one's in metropolitan Atlanta and one is in Savannah. And so there's a lot of information. We're resource rich here in information, but access to capital is hard to get, especially if you do not have assets. And so my advice would be to tell your people, your women, pull your credit report. You can do it free. Go to Credit Karma. I know you think this is silly, but find out what your credit is. Because if you have blemishes, be it too many credit cards or a medically fragile child that you maxed out your insurance, nobody in the traditional world cares. You're not going to be able to get financing, and you cannot grow like these women. They can't grow their businesses without capital. It just won't happen. So get them to start now, start early, because if you got to clean up your credit, it's going to take some time.
Thank you, panel, and thank you, audience, for showing up today as a united community of women. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, Grace, Malika, and Kadira. Thank you very much. Words of wisdom. As we close out our program, we want to once again thank our sponsors who make this programming possible and who have supported the IWF Fellows Program. There are some IWF fellows in the audience. Will you just stand up so that we can see you? Monica. I called out the fellows because we're going to begin soon the nominating process for fellows. So if you know of a rock star rising leader, this is IWF's signature program to train and develop rising female leaders. If you know of someone who would be a good woman to join this collective, to join this group, please think about nominating them. You should get information via email in about a week. Our contributing sponsors, Agnes Scott College, Cox Enterprises, the Atlanta Press Club, and the Georgia Commission on Women, thank you for your support of this program. And now, stay with me, ladies, it's a marathon, but it's one you want to be in. I want to thank our patrons, the women who have made this program possible. Susan Bell, Candy Berman, Kathy Bremer, Jan Prisby Bryson, Molly Burke, Susanna Chavez, Ann Kramer, Roxanne Douglas, Gina Espinosa, Gail Evans, Amy Glennon, Julia Houston, Grace Jackson, Marsha Sampson Johnson, Carrie Love, Glenda Minkin, Mary Moore, Claudia Patton, Ambassador Marianne Peters, Sabrina Shannon, Leslie Siebert, Christine St. Clair, Belinda Stubblefield, Ray Utenhove. Thank you. As we close out our program, I want to remind you that you can find information, QR code. I know your neighbor helped you to get that so that you can download and you can read all about all of the organizations that presented today. I was jotting down notes as I listened throughout the last few hours, and we started with the grandmothers, but what kept coming up was the mothers, right? And not so the mothers who birth someone, but also the mothers who just pour in, who nurture, who heal, who launch a business, who launch an initiative, who launch a project, just that idea of mothering. And so much wisdom came forth today that I wrote down. I thought about at the top of the program, what it must be like for a Russian mother who doesn't understand why her son is going to fight. What it must be like for the Afghan woman who just arrived here a few months ago and left so many people behind. And I was so grateful to sit right next to Maya, who is here with her mother, and who reminded us at the top of the program of breath. Breath is life. It is the connector, like the mothers. And so I leave you today with a little bit of the wisdom that I've heard. We're definitely going to have Sophia come to the next program. We all want to hear from her. But a lot of wisdom that came from Paige and Michelle and Padia and Hogai and Alpa and Cartera. Watch your language. Listen. We need to protect our progress. Learn how to grow your money. Research. I am going to bet on myself. I assured my staff that I had their back so that they could take care of our customers. Have passion for what you're doing. Women are resilient. I thank you for this program. We have some food and drink in the back. Please enjoy yourselves, talk to each other, communicate, network. This is our time. Thank you all very much.